Hello and welcome back to Curiosity Mine and to Bush Botany, the series in which we follow Warwick Schofield around the opal fields of Lightning Ridge, learning about the plants and trees that coexist with the opal miners, and in the case of today's species, with each other. In this video we headed out near Growan, which is an opal field about 50 kilometres away from Lightning Ridge, past the town of Cumbora, where we found this.
Okay, so here we are with a very, very interesting piece of scenery. We're looking at a forest here of silver-leafed ironbark eucalypts and Spinifex grass. Normally when we look at a community, we describe it as the most dominant species that we can see. But in this case there are two, the trees or the grass, and maybe the two live in association. So it's really a eucalypt grassland community where the two work together. The grassland of Spinifex also will work in a community shared with the mulga trees around here, so you can get the mulga Spinifex community, but in this case we've got the silver-leafed ironbark, the black bark, and the beautiful, beautiful Spinifex grass, and right now it's in flower, and we'll talk a bit more about that later. But let's start with the eucalypt. The ironbark, Eucalyptus melanifloria, which means black bark. So it's really the black barked eucalypt rather than the silver-leafed eucalypt, which is its common name. The leaves are rather grey, glaucous, sort of a dusky colour, not the normal olive green that we see from eucalypt leaves. They're quite a pale, whitish colour, and hence that the grey-leafed or silver-leafed, which is its common name. It's a eucalypt which really only lives from here. We're right on the southern limit of its distribution. It can grow a bit further south, but a different species of ironbark is in the Pilliga forest. This one grows a little bit to the west and a little bit to the east, but right across the border from here into Queensland, right up through central Queensland and across to the Queensland east coast. So we're right on the southern limits of this silver-leafed ironbark. It was first described by von Müller, a famous German botanist who came to Australia and did a lot of work on our plants, finished up as the head of in Victoria of their herbarium and also their Victorian National Botanic Gardens. So we'll often see after a scientific name von Müller, which is Count von Müller, well known for his studies of Australian eucalypts and other plants, many plants. The interesting thing about grass is, and a lot of people don't realise, grass is a flowering plant, the same as the eucalypt. It's a flowering plant. And in fact, right now we are so lucky, it's in flower. And it has these huge flower stalks with the little purpley coloured flowers. You can see them there, the little stamens. It still hasn't turned into proper seeds. It's a monocotyledonous plant, and such as with wheat and barley and Spinifex, it's a grass, monocotyledon grass, and it has these seed heads. The one I love about these is the exude of resin which comes from the flower heads, the stems. It's a beautiful, beautiful resinous smell. I can feel it quite much in the air now. If you drove through this, it will stick onto the muffler of a motor vehicle and you'll be smelling the resin for days afterwards. The plant itself is fairly spiky. It is a Spinifex, sometimes called a porcupine grass. So, the species of this particular Spinifex, Triodia, and there are many species, probably 30 or 40 different ones. This Triodia is Michelii, named after Mitchell the explorer. Triodia Michelii, first put forward by Robert Brown, a very famous botanist that came from Scotland. And Brown came first to Western Australia, and he was to come with Banks on his exploration looking for plants, but he missed out on that trip, but later came with Flinders on the Investigator. And from that expedition in Western Australia, Robert Brown did many plant specimens, over 1,000, which he sent back curated to the Kew Gardens in London, which were the world headquarters of monotype, prototype, type specimens of newly discovered plants. Unfortunately, the ship Porpoise sank and lost a lot of his specimens after that first couple of years, but Brown did not give up. He continued for a further 3 years. And whilst in Eastern Australia, he found these amazing porcupine grasses. Later on in the 1950s, a well-known botanist also, Nancy Burbidge, who did a lot of work particularly on grasses, had another look at this particular one. And she discovered that there were some aspects of the plant that were a little bit different from all those that were described, and she gave it the variety or subspecies name of pubivagina. Now, we won't go into how that name was derived, but that was the work of Nancy Burbidge. And that name is still accepted with the specimens in Kew Gardens in London, although, as with all plant groups, there's always going to be some discussions and some reclassification and so on. The genus Triodia, which Brown came up with in the 1850s, a long time ago, was because there's a little sheath around the base of the flower itself called a lemma, and normally that little sheath just comes to a point in the way most leaves or little type structures will do. But under the microscope, Brown was able to see that that sheath had 3 little points on it, and hence Triodia, the name for this genus.
Spinifex has been used for centuries, millennia, by First Nations people for basket weaving, and the sticky resin from the grass has been used as an adhesive for making spears. As of only a few years ago, companies are experimenting with the use of Spinifex fibres for reinforcing rubber products, and the resin is being explored as a possible medical solution. There is another plant more correctly called Spinifex, Spinifex longifolius, which you might be familiar with if you live in Australia but closer to the sea, where it's usually called coastal grass. Spinifex longifolius is not actually related to Triodia, like what we see at Grawin, which is referred to as Spinifex as a common name only, because that's not confusing at all. Let's wrap this up by going down a rabbit burrow of related trivia thanks to Robert Brown, the Scottish botanist who named the Triodia michelii species.
In fact, Brown was really an inventor, an explorer of Leeuwenhoek's invention of the microscope. And Brown started using the microscope to look at the finer details in defining the species and subspecies or varieties of plants. One of the things Brown did, which is really interesting, was to drop seeds from some plants into water. And they would burst open and go in funny little random spirals and shapes as they fell through the water. And attributing this to some quality in the living seeds, it was then attempted with inorganic matter, little very, very fine grains, dropping them into a liquid. And it was also found that they moved in strange little random directions, since named Brownian motion, after Robert Brown, the botanist. So there you go, there's a little piece of trivia that brings us all the way from Triodia and the use of the Leeuwenhoek's microscope to Brownian motion of particles in liquid. So how many rabbit burrows can we go down when we start studying the details of a plant?
And isn't that always the question? I love it when stories connect together and form something that's more than the sum of its parts. Not to get too deep into the connection with quantum mechanics, but Brownian motion in particles, seeds and grains, is roughly equivalent to the motion of quantum particles at a subatomic level. I'm not a quantum physicist, so I'm going to stop there. The mathematics behind Brownian motion is called the Wiener process, and it was developed by Norbert Wiener. That's something that you now know.
The hot dog! We have a wiener! Yellow.
This video was made with the help of Warwick Schofield with support from Margaret Schofield. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to Curiosity Mine on YouTube and maybe even supporting the channel directly via Patreon. The link is in the description. And thank you for watching.